So, first of all, one of the things that I had mentioned to Scott Parks, who's had all of these years, and he's continuing to actually invest in the regeneration of his fields, is that I think we're sort of getting a sense of why are they continuing to do this? Because this is out of the common practice in agriculture. It's out of the typical agronomic recommendations for your field and your crop. And Scott, I'd like to start with you. You have a lot of experience. I think you can explain as to why you, after all these years, stay committed to regeneration, and what is your general counsel to farmers that are sitting in this audience today?
The reason we've stayed with it is that it fits everything. It's about what we want to be and what we want to be doing. I comment that we're a no-excuse farm. In years past, especially going back into the 80s, I was always trying to cover my ass, excuse my French, on what our practices were and what we were doing, and that it's okay. Like, no, you have to feed America, you have to feed the world. And I still see that as the get out of jail free card for most farmers, is say, well, no, you can't feed the world. Well, yeah, you can feed the world, and you can feed them really healthy food also. So it's just, for us, it's what's comfortable, but it also makes sense if you have a natural resource, an ability to take a natural resource that is the source of your financial welfare, and you make it better every year. That seems to be only common sense. That's good business. And when I talk to groups, especially with farmers, but everyone to understand, our system is profit driven, okay? It doesn't do any good to save the earth and go broke. So the system, and this is why I emphasize the net profit rather than chasing yield. We make money doing this, and we just happen to also be improving the environment and the community. You know, they're going hand in hand, and the three match up. So it seems, ridiculous to even consider moving on from it, and the fact that we can look at our farm and everything we're doing is positive in the long run. We're not. Our tillage, we shrink the tillage to as little as possible to be efficient. And that's what basically people figure out, how do we attack our farm? And they attack it, well, you guys till. Yeah, well, you tell me one organic farmer in California of any size, like over 10 acres, that's farming no-till. Zero, right? It's very, very difficult to do. Tillage is a part of it, but targeted tillage, only what you need to do, that's what you do. And I still ask the question, why is such a big deal a 3-inch gets disturbed? This gives you a nice soil, right? Soil seed contact, warms up the soil, you're able to grow your crop. Which leads to the other thing on our farm is not perfect. But don't let perfect eliminate the good. How much positive are we doing is this type of farming for all, for everyone? Yeah, there you can design a better farm, but for us, we feel very comfortable about what we're doing, that we have a no-excuse farm that makes the farm, the environment, and the people in our area better, along with keeping us in business.
Thank you, Scott. Curt, I'm going to ask you, if I could, because you brought up a subject that's really problematic. So in regenerative farming, all of you talked about how you're moving towards reducing costs. You're not chasing the yield as the number one question. Of course, price is always a big thing. But Curt, you brought up a really important question about price, and you just had a global market create a real crisis for you. And I'm not sure there's any way you can back out enough cost to produce rice at $7. What are your thoughts with regard to long term? Because in your soils, you have a limit of what you can actually grow there. So what, as a family, as a fourth generation, the investment in soil has been crucial. What are the things you're thinking about? So you have to regenerate the incomes in some ways, maybe diversity. What are your thoughts as far as strategically thinking for your family's future in this farming business?
That's a loaded question. Our family basically is looking at, well, let me back up. the soil health that we have allows us to do some things like not flying on or putting on potash, phosphate for a year or two. We've got enough stuff in there. The other question is tillage. I'm thinking about going back to no-till rice as a conversation because it changes the whole dynamic of your cost structure. You know, the question is there any way to create another market of something? So, you know, my son is playing with, I don't know if he wants me to tell you this, but he is now in the business of selling duck eggs. And the amazing thing is there's a market out there that is just, he can't produce enough eggs. So we're buying more ducks. The revenue is incredible. And, you know, I didn't realize that people were allergic to chicken eggs, but, you know, they can eat duck eggs. So, you know, we're kind of out of the box, as you can tell. But, you know, at the same time, we're going to try to keep the farm together and keep moving forward. And that's, you know, we'll do everything we can.
Thank you very much. You've highlighted, if I may just add into this, is the points that all of you have made with regard to less cost, particularly on tillage. And when I was living in South Africa and doing research there with Howard Buffett, I was asked to speak at a no-till conference. And in that no-till conference, farmers, I was telling this to Dale last night at dinner, the no-till farmers saying, I'm feeling guilty. I'm sitting on the porch. I'm not out there in the field so much. He said, actually, I'm not having to buy new tractors the way I used to have to buy new tractors. I'm not working for the equipment people. Now I'm working for myself. And that cost factor, and Scott, as you said, you can't eliminate tillage. It's not just organic. We're learning on Dale's farm, we can't eliminate certain practices because we got to get that seed to soil contact to happen, and a lot of residue can create a problem with that. But how do you reduce cost? And that's what all of you addressed today. And that's part of what regenerative agriculture wants to bring, because it's part of the focus of building the healthier systems. Dale, you're the newest one to this table, a farmer that had no earthworms just 5-6 years ago, that now even brought some up here with us. Thank you for your demonstration and what you showed on the soil health and this change that has happened. Part of the thing that I think you bring to the table is part of what both Curt and Scott had talked a little bit about, and that's about quality of product. And so where do you think regenerative brings to the table with regard to quality? Because that's part of your distinction, is quality of your product.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dr. Lascelles. I have to admit, I'm still chasing profit. I'm still chasing quality, and I'm chasing yield, but I want to do it in a more responsible manner. You know, if I don't take care of the soil is not going to take care of me and my family for generations to come. I'm excited about the possibility of what we're seeing on the farm. If you go back and look at our valley over the last 50 years, our valley average is somewhere between 7 and 8 tons of alfalfa, and the quality could be dairy quality, milk cow hay, or dry cow hay. And what I've seen with regenerative farming practices and just changing our farming practices to shorten up our alfalfa growth cycle from 3 to 4 or 5 years to 2 to 3 years, is the quality has really came up. Our farm average is 10 ton. I mentioned this to Dr. Lascelles last night. I'm greedy. I want to go 11 and 12 ton, and I only think that's possible is through regenerative farm practices and stuff, so that even though we're growing alfalfa for dairies in overseas, California and Arizona, we want to grow a higher quality alfalfa, actually the highest quality alfalfa, for the natural resources that we're using with a limited amount of water. And I think our water will become more and more limited. And so I think a few years ago we heard the phrase, or coined the phrase, more crop per drop. So definitely chasing quality with less inputs, and we think regenerative is the way to go.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you to address one other issue that we saw come up on your farm, And then I want to open this to questions from the audience or comments. Dale, because we have on your farm literally side by side on 3 different replications where there's a furrow that goes right down between regenerative and conventional, Dr. Daly and her team have been asking to look at some nutrient density questions. And so we asked you, and you don't grow corn, to grow some corn, and you grew some corn late in the season. And you called me and you said, well, the corn died. Could you tell that story? And this was not the study we were trying to do. We were trying to look at nutrients.
Yeah, if I go back and I talked to Dr. Josiassen, my family is out of Nebraska too. My great-grandfather was a corn farmer. I had nothing to do with corn. And they asked me if I would plant this corn in the corn Chico 1 study, and we did do a fall corn in Palo Verde Valley in September. And it just so happened we had record heat in September. It was 115 degrees, and the corn just did not make it. And I told him, I'm a little embarrassed for the family. But what was really impressive to me was the fact that the regenerative corn in the regenerative field was much more resilient. Even though we didn't make a commercial crop on either the conventional or the regenerative, it was drastic, the difference between the corn crops that we did go ahead and continue to grow out with the crop that we had left. And I'm seeing that even in our Bermuda hay that, Doctor, we like to grow for the retail horse market. Typically in the Palo Verde Valley, we have a frost a couple of days, and it damages the Bermuda, and it goes up dormant, and then we burn it off in the springtime. And on the regenerative fields that we have some Bermuda in, it didn't go dormant. It didn't turn brown and stuff like that. So we had a really hard time with burning the Bermuda off. And so again, there was some resiliency in the plant in the regenerative soil that we weren't expecting.
Thank you, Dale. And I just want to reiterate that neither of those are studies. Weren't pulling the right soil samples or asking the right questions to say how resilient are crops in weather extremes. That's going to be such a critical issue for food security around the world. And it looks like in these little sort of snippets, as we're looking at that, it looks like a healthier biological soil creates more resiliency in the crop as well. And it might be really important for us to continue those questions and look at studying that as well as far as food security for the globe. Let me open this up, please, to the audience today. These 3 great resources we have up here I know are anxious to share with you and respond to questions or thoughts you may have. So raise your hand. Zion has the microphone. We'll come and bring it to you. Right in front. Stephen.
Yeah, I have a couple, a few quick questions. When you're looking, the Dale gentleman in the middle, with assessing quality for your alfalfa and hay, are you also looking at the nutrient density? And that's my first question. Second question was for Scott. You mentioned animal integration. Are you making your farm a little bit more economically viable by stacking enterprises?
And to your first question about nutrient density, yes, absolutely. Every cutting, we're taking a composite core sample of the alfalfa, and what we're seeing when we shorten our rotation up, and what we're hoping to see with regenerative alfalfa this year, is that we can maintain quality without reducing the harvest cycle. Typically in the Palo Verde Valley, when the weather gets warm, we go from a 30-day cutting cycle to maybe a 26-day, even a 24. Some days we have asked us to go to 20, and it's not good on the alfalfa plant. So yeah, every cutting, we're looking at that to maintain quality and compare that to other fields of alfalfa that we grow.
We use sheep from a owner of sheep. Chaos is the name of the company, and actually they're an excellent company to deal with. So as far as stacking enterprises, we actually ran some numbers. Paul Glowowski here helped me look at it years ago to whether it made sense, and it didn't pencil. So we just have an agreement with a sheep company that they come in and they don't charge us anything for feeding, and we don't charge them anything for having the feed. So it's a good working relationship. The stacking enterprises sounds good. Your words would tickle Gabe Brown's heart. But in our end, we run a super simple farm. I mean, we're not incorporated. Everything is wholesale. We don't have layers of foremans and what have you. So the simplicity of the farm is fine without bringing on animals. And in fact, we figured we'd need 20,000 sheep from the period from late February to the first week of May. And we have a hard time getting 5,000. So yeah, the whole logistics of that, it doesn't work.
But is that how you terminate your covers with grazing?
Well, if it works out that way. The grazing's fine. Honestly, I can say it's almost more, it feels good, but you can't take that to the bank. But it looks right when you have them grazing through, 2 foot, 4 foot high radish and what have you. And just also, that's somewhat of a misnomer that the grazing, that the animals will replace your chopper, because like say we have 100-acre field and we have like 2,000 sheep in there. Well, by the time they get across the field, it's like 2 weeks. Well, guess what? They grazed 2 weeks ago. It's back to 1 foot, 2 foot high. So we got to chop it anyway. So we've been doing it for 5 years. We're kind of tinkering with it just because we think it's right, but we won't sell our soul. We won't change our cropping pattern in order to fit the animals. The animals fit us. We'll plant multi-species cover crops that the sheep like to graze, but only because we know that crop isn't going to be planted until May, and so doesn't give us a lot of difficult biomass to deal with. Like we got to plant corn, safflower, tomatoes in late March. We'll just have a legume because we don't want to have all that other stuff that makes light tillage and planting simple. So the cover crops fit what was done before, and they fit what it's going into.
Thank you, Scott. Next question in the back over here. Oh, another one first, right to you. Sorry, you'll be next.
My name is Olga. Thank you very much for your presentations. What I learned I'm a new farmer. I grow monocrop, I grow olives. And my question is related with, I would like to know some advice from you, where to start and what metrics to look at when you start moving from conventional growing to regenerative farming.
I'll make one quick comment on that because I have a knee-jerk reaction to, especially with trees, or how old your olives are. But if you have, I've been approached by people that have wanted to shift gears, like on almonds and prunes and stuff, and that tree root system's been developed to something, for 20-some years, and then you throw it a completely different ball game. Like it can be a very negative. It might be the right thing to do, but I would be more prone to be shifting a young orchard than an old orchard. But in either way, the principles that are being encouraged these days, they all make sense of making use of all the land. I know olives are denser planted, So, but as far as going cover crops and building up the soil and getting the microorganisms, sprinkling systems, I see sprinkling system on trees that are very confined, that they're only like 10 feet wide, but the trees are 20 feet apart, and you have all this ground that is not getting water. Well, you're not taking advantage of the full profile that you can have the microbes working for you. So those are the two things I think of right offhand.
Dale or Curt, either of you have a comment for Olga?
I'm not a tree farmer, but I know some people who have tried to do it and have been successful at it. But like Scott was saying, as they started out with it, I'm not sure what kind of a risk you're going to take trying to convert it and get all that put together in a short period of time. But that's, I would talk to somebody who is a regenerative soil science, and I'm sure they could probably give you some advice and help you get started or on your way if that's the way you want to go.
And Olga, Dr. Daly has some resources too with some regenerative orchardists that be sure and check with her right here, okay? In the back, please.
Yeah, this is a question for Scott. Scott, because you manage, seems like massive amounts of residue, do you have any issues with denitrification? And if so, how do you treat that?
Yeah, we have a constant learning curve, putting it nicely, on dealing with biomass. So we put 10 to 15 tons a year of biomass on every acre in the form of compost, crop residue, and cover crops. The denitrification is not as big of a deal as far as that, on that term. Where we screw up is the picture I showed you, where we had the nice thatch on top and we put it under during the season. We try to have as much introduction of biomass and get in the corn in the carbon nitrogen ratio, giving it the winter to break down instead of coming into the spring and introducing a lot of stuff and tying up the nitrogen. That is really the big problem that we have happening, is management of when that carbon's introduced. And so that's why we'd like to grow, if possible, summer cover crops, because then we have all winter to break it down, because most of our crops are planted through the spring and summer.
Next question. Right here, Zion.
So I have a double question, one for Curt and one for Scott. Curt, you mentioned in your listing of your inputs that you use biochar. So I wanted to understand, there's lots of buzz about biochar right now. And I wondered whether that was strictly to aerate the soil or whether you're expecting some other result from that. And then for Scott, you use compost in some cases, it sounds like. So I'm trying to understand the economic strategy there. Is it just to enhance soil health? How are you looking at that?
The biochar that I used was a company out of Colorado, and we were doing an experiment with him, and basically it was to flocculate this clay and get it broken apart, because as you know, clay ties up a lot of minerals, and if you can get that available, it cuts on your cost of fertilizer. So that was our reason for using it. We've done it 3 years in a row. I've only done it on our organic field, so it's tough to see what kind of a differentiation it is with chicken manure instead of an aqua or some kind of nitrogen fertilizer.
Yeah, compost played a really critical role when we started in the 90s shifting fields, because you have a dead system, and then how are you going to introduce nitrogen? And because it's all been synthetic, you're going to have definitely a nitrogen shortage. So compost initially served that purpose. But when it gets right down to it, I almost wonder why every acre of every farm doesn't put on compost. I mean, you're getting all kinds of micronutrients. You're getting microbes. You're getting your NPK. You're getting aeration of the soil by putting all the biomass in. I mean, frankly, I feel like don't tell anybody what I said, you know, because we only have so much nitrogen. We only have so much compost. Yeah, it's a fabulous tool. In time, it's taken less of a role. But also when I started on our journey, NPK was it. And so how are you going to get your NPK? And it was compost. It really until about 2015, you know, just about 10 years ago is when the word microbes and microbial biomass and what have you started to get really in the vernacular of California farming. And it still plays, for the most part, a lesser role. So compost served that purpose of providing NPK, but it actually, so on our farm, to give you an example of how good of a role of compost and cover crops do, on all the crops we're growing in, we're growing crops that have its value as high as 8,000 an acre. We're using compost, seaweed, and we're introducing microorganisms. That's it. That's all that's being put on those fields. And of course, cover crops and crop residue. So the compost is covering the manganese, and it's covering the cobalt and the boron and the zinc. You're getting that in every ton that you're putting in. So it seems foolish to not use it. If you actually broke down the cost of all those micronutrients combined with the macronutrients, if you pay $75 a ton, in a sense, it's a steal. But it also doesn't hurt that we get a premium because we use compost and we're organic. It would be, in the long run, it would be good business for conventional, but the premium helps cover that, yeah.
Thank you. I think the compost question is an important one. There's a question in the back, and when I was CEO of Rodale Institute and we were doing research, one of the things I noticed was the truckloads of leaf matter that came out of Allentown and Bethlehem to the research center. When you think we were basically getting all the leaf matter and making compost and using it on the farm, what were the other farmers' sources of compost? You're right, Scott, there's not enough to go around. So it is a tremendous part. Of course, an organic depended on it so much. And it's part of why the cover cropping system, where we're going to learn more and more as we bring into it, what does the biodiverse cover crops bring to that system? Because we don't have enough source for compost for every farmer around the world. And it's a kind of thing that I think we have to continue to focus on. Where is that boron going to come from? Do we have to import it, or can it be cycled? And I think those are important questions. There's another question back here.
Thank you. I have maybe three questions. One for Scott. Are you currently providing your own compost to yourself by not bringing outside compost in? And how is that working? And then the other question I have is more for Curt about rice farming. It seems like the people in Louisiana are having some big success with crawdad farming intercropped into their rice fields. I'm wondering, you know, I'm from South Sutter County, so we're doing pretty bad there in rice profits and walnut farming. And so wondering if you guys have made any efforts to implement crawdad production into your rice fields and successes or failures in that. And then my last question, probably to the three of you, is have any of you implemented electrolyzed water into your cultivation practices? Thank you.
Okay, on the compost side, yes, as a matter of fact, we do. We do a lot of composting, but it's not how you think of composting. It's with the crop residue, growing the crops, of putting all the corn biomass in the ground, all the wheat, all the sorghum, all the rice, and that is compost, right? Except for that we're having the microbes doing the composting instead of putting it in piles and then putting it into the ground. So yeah, and then because everything goes back, nothing leaves the field or nothing's put we have nothing left over to compost. Everything's either sold or moved out, or it stays in the field and it's put in the ground.
I'm going to give you a funny story. back in the 80s, there was a local farm family that actually flew their twin-engine plane back to Louisiana and bought a plane load of red crawdads back. Interestingly enough, they put them in their field, they flooded the field, and we had one of the bigger rainstorms that year that we'd had in a while. And Butte Creek flooded. In the next 4 years, we had red crawdads everywhere. We could not keep boxes together. Irrigation boxes were blowing out. We had I mean, it was a mess. That being said, they're here now. The biggest problem, at least from what I knew about it at that time, was Louisiana has a lot warmer weather than we do. Basically, our crawdads bury themselves in the ground to stay warm in the winter, and they don't come up till you reflood. So even though you put them in there, they disappear. So it's not a way to make a revenue stream, but it was thought about. And I'm not sure what you mean about electrolyzed water. I've never heard of that, so I will do that.
No on the water.
Yeah, I've tried most everything, but the electric lights is a new one. So I will look it up. But I will be experimenting with something close to electricity, and that's to zap weeds. I will be running that next month, but as far as doing anything to water, no. But I will look into it, and thank you.
All right, we're down to our last couple of minutes. Is there a quick question? Right here.
Okay. I first want to say humble legends here. Scott, how many crops do you grow?
About 20.
And simple farm system. Amazing simple farm system. So, Dale, this was a question for you on the demonstration you did. If you could share just a little bit more, and then maybe if the other two of you could also give your insights to what was demonstrated, because I feel like what you demonstrated was something that was very important in the soil health realm that you kind of glossed over maybe a little bit just for time. But if you could just expand a little bit on what we witnessed, I think that would be beautiful to hear from you all just quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So, in fact, I don't know where the demonstration has the water reached the bottom with the conventional soil yet? Not yet. Yeah, we still have time. So that soil came out of the same field side by side, and what you're seeing in that demonstration is with the conventional soil is that's all the practices that we learned how to do, we borrowed from our neighbors and stuff like that to try to get that percolation in that water to go down into the soil, and a 4-foot ripper, a 6-foot plow, multiple disking to break up those clods, and we're beating the crap out of the soil, and you see we're not getting the results with the regenerative dirt clod. That's an accumulation of multiple multi-species cover crops over a 4-year period that just really changed the structure of that soil, and you can see it how it's held together, and we don't have the erosion. So 4 years, 4 years, and we really didn't see the change in the soil. It took about 2 years before we started seeing the change in the soil between the two systems. But you have to remember, I've had my hand at that field for 35 years, and the gentleman before me, he farmed it for 35 years, and we just love John Deere and Caterpillar, and that's a result of that farming system. You can see it's not benefiting the soil. Well, yeah, we kind of got out of the way of nature and let nature do what nature does with just backing off on all the heavy tillage and stuff like that. And it really goes against what we were taught and what we learned is the more tillage, the better. If a little bit of fertilizer is good, a lot is better. And we've just kind of changed that philosophy and that thinking and kind of let nature kind of help us become a better farmer.
Yes. Let me just, did you ask a question for Curt too, or that was primarily just for the demonstration? Well, I know we're out of time. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think it is important, and one of the things that we're noticing in all of these fields is that Dr. Daly can share with you some of the data, or Annette or Raquel that are here looking at the data. We see that biology jumps fast immediately with these cover cropping systems, multi-species. You get a whole burst of more life, and then you get the fungal communities start to come up. And it seems that they're a really integral part of the life and health of that system. One last question right over here.
Has anybody had experience with underground drip irrigation and also experience with wood chips, adding wood chips to the soil?
I have. Who's asking? Yes, I've done drip off and on since '94, and on our particular system, it does not work well. The argument for, I would say, drip will increase your yield, and under synthetic farming, we actually find a yield drop of almost 10 tons on going from sub-irrigation is worse than we furrow irrigate. So the reason that I'm not using drip is we don't have the water shortage problem, one. Okay, but also, so we're spending all this time putting 10 to 15 tons of biomass on all the field. It's working down 5 feet, it's out to the edge of the bed, and then you have a drip system, and your wetting pattern, they call it an onion. It goes like about 10 inches wide, and it goes down like 2 feet. But that's, your roots, right, are only productive where there's moisture. So why are we creating this great environment to have roots develop and then have a drip system where the root system is so limited? And plus the nutrition is, how do you get it into that? Now you start feeding it through your drip system, and in a sense, it's glorified hydroponic farming. Is that what you're doing? It's needed. In the South State, water short, I don't argue, but in our situation, and we have good ground, why not capitalize on having every inch available all year long?
Thank you so much. It has been a phenomenal opportunity for us to be in your audience today, gentlemen. The years of experience that you bring to us, your successes and your failures and your understanding and your learnings are really crucial as we begin to all transition our soils to building health and building a future for all of society. Scott, Dale, and Curt, thank you.